Well, hello and welcome to See, Hear, Love, a web show and online destination where you are seen, heard, and deeply loved by God. And there's some singing and dancing along the way as well, right, girls? Yes. Well, I'm joined today by my incredible co-hosts, Joanna and Cheryl, and our special guest host and hopefully one day designer, Tim Tang.
Fashion designer.
Fashion designer, Tim Tang.
Honey, we're wearing Tim Tang.
The associate director of the Tyndale Intercultural Ministries, which I love. Tim works for Tim. I'm sorry, Tim. I have to keep saying that. Tim works for Tim.
Yep.
At Tyndale.
Tim works at Tyndale. I know. Anyway, thank you.
Not Tim Hortons.
Not Tim Hortons.
She sells seashells by the
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we talked on Monday about the scripture verse in Revelation 7, 9 to 10, and that was a great conversation. I just want to read that again on the New Life Bible app with you here. It said this: "After this, I saw a vast crowd, too great to count, from every nation and tribe and people and language, standing in front of the throne and before the Lamb. They are clothed in white robes and held palm branches in their hands, and they were shouting with a great roar, 'Salvation comes from our God, who sits on the throne, and from the Lamb.'" Now, there was a lot of conversation on Monday. Is there any other follow-up thoughts to this that we didn't get to on Monday, but anything that was percolating the past day or so, now that we're on Wednesday, that you'd like to share as before we go into Tim's story?
Just the coming together of various diverse cultures, but making this one glorious sound and shout unto God.
Yeah.
So this sort of synergy and unity, but still within our culture, still diverse, still celebrating our culture, but surrendering that to unity at the same time, and knowing that we are all one huge family.
Yeah,
in God.
and I love that I would be waving palm branches.
Right?
I'm sorry, but that's just one of those great things I would love to do. That's all.
You dig the palm branches.
Yeah.
It's for me. It's this picture that I get. Like I feel like a taste of this, not in a real sense, but like when you go to like a huge stadium sports event or something, and like that's the only thing I can compare it to, right? Where there's 20,000, 40,000 people, 100,000 people, like roaring in one direction, like roaring for one team and in one direction.
Yeah.
And there's people from lots of different cultures usually that will be in Toronto at one particular game, and it's this picture that is the closest thing I can imagine to what this will be, and it's nothing like it, but it's the closest thing.
That's actually a good
can
picture because
imagine.
and
There's
the
this
feeling and energy
that
and
you're all
swept
in it together, and like no
that's
matter
good.
no matter where whether you're in the cheap seats or the expensive ones, like you're all cheering for that same team, and it's the closest thing. I don't know. That's the kind of feeling I get when I'm in those. I don't go to sports a lot, but when I do.
It's
that, or even when I'm in church and like it's a day where like lots of people are gathered and we're all pointing ourselves in the same direction. That feeling of this is a taste of what this will be, and it's hopeful because life doesn't look like this in the diversity we experience in our city today. But this is like what we're going towards. It's hopeful. It's really hopeful. So how does that play out for you in your work?
Well, the only thing I'd add to that, I mean, when I think about that, I mean, I sometimes think about whether it's a concert or a sports event, whether it's a large gathering. I mean, on one hand, people may be chanting the same thing or saying the same thing or singing the same thing. But what happens when this roar is almost unintelligible? When you're singing something different, the same words but in a different language, and I'm singing the same words but in a different language, it's a very different noise, a very different roar that to some may seem like chaos, but to others, that incredible diversity
And ultimately to
becomes-
God, it's the most beautiful sound heard.
It sounds like
exciting.
chaos, but it's beautiful to him. It's the aroma of the fragrance of beauty, and that's where it becomes. And that reminds me a little bit of, there's this beautiful picture of coming together, but it's never an easy road. And getting there, it's tough. If there's no conflict within a community, I sometimes, judge whether or not they're actually having diversity or not. I mean, everybody gets along really well, and it's so easy. Maybe you're all actually functioning within the same culture. Like, you may be using different languages, but you're all actually functioning culturally the same.
So
when it's that
so
easy.
you're saying though, Tim, that there always should be a bit of tension.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, because crossing cultural boundaries should stretch you
Right.
at some point.
And if you're not being stretched, you're actually doing the same thing.
And if you're not being stretched, you're not growing.
Right.
Good.
Look at this. She says, "I got it." Tim, you're
That
just
hit me.
yeah, I know. That's
You got
really
it. That's
good.
good.
I've never thought about that because you always think that a successful relationship or connection is when everything's going well.
Right.
Right? But that's actually it's like an aha moment.
Conflict is good.
Conflict is good.
Conflict.
Tim.
But then going there with cultures, there
Yeah.
are cultures who would say conflict is very bad,
bad.
very bad,
We don't
very
talk about
bad.
conflict.
We do
Not
not
talk about it,
conflict.
right.
And some cultures are more that way
Yes.
than others.
And yeah, which makes
Look
it
at your face, I
which
get-
makes it even more
So
difficult.
you might think everything's fine, but the person
Really,
from the
right.
culture who is not able to speak
Absolutely.
about it
Yes.
is actually
Interesting.
burning up inside.
Yes.
But they're not able to.
So
talk
how do you
about
talk about it without talking about it?
Yeah. So what's the
What do
what's the
you-
answer?
How do you teach
Yeah,
people
how do you do that?
to deal with that?
Yeah, I'm always learning. So that posture of learning is just constant. And so it is when you enter into a different community or context, how do I deal with this head on without being head on? So if Joanne and I are talking about conflict, but I know that she just can't deal with it, maybe in this context, I need to talk to Melinda in order to talk to Joanne.
Yeah.
Because in that cultural language, that's what makes sense. And I
Okay.
don't need to speak to her directly because she won't hear it from me directly.
Yeah.
She needs to hear it this way. She needs to hear it this way. And that's the communication style that works for that people group.
Now, personally for you, Tim, because I want to get into your story, because
Yeah.
you do have quite a story. You said that your dad is Cantonese,
Yes.
mom is Mandarin,
Yeah.
and you are.
I'm Canadian.
There you go. I am Canadian.
Yeah.
So let's hear about the story, because there must be some learnings
Right.
from your journey,
Sure.
and your family life, and then to where you've gotten to now be the associate director of intercultural ministries, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me now, I mean, I do see touch points all over the map. So, I mean, my first response is, do you want the long story or the short story? You know, the short story would be, I'd say, you know, I work in a Chinese church, so new immigrant church, Cantonese mainly, but with any immigrant church, there's going to be an English congregation with a second generation coming up. So there's an English congregation, there's a Mandarin congregation. And so those three groups, although it sounds like it's just languages that we work together and we may ethnically be all Chinese, there's a lot of cultural differences. And so them getting along, and any Chinese church you'll run into has challenges, and a lot of it is just internal. And so for us, that became, well, how do we solve this? I mean, there's some literature, some researchers out there who have tried to tackle it with not a lot of success. And for us specifically in Toronto, where our church is, we're an Arabic-speaking community.
Oh,
Wow.
So
Interesting.
we're Cantonese, Mandarin, and English in an Arabic-speaking community. What do you do with that? And so
right.
that led me down a journey of we're not asking the right questions. Is it just about having a bunch of potlucks, a bunch of VBSs? VBS doesn't mean anything to somebody who's never been to church. And so how do you speak languages in other languages? How do you speak God's mercy and grace in a way that makes sense for them?
and
to
how do you
them?
present yourself in a way that's inviting to
Right.
those?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, it brought me down that path of studying more. What does culture mean? What does it look like? What does it mean to train up our leaders interculturally to have those soft skills of being able to relate with one another beyond even just, hey, here's the gospel message, here's what we're about, the church. And that led me down this path of doing more with other churches, and led me down the path of getting to Tyndale. The slightly longer story, I'll give you a little bit of that. I mean, I was born in Canada. My parents were Cantonese and Mandarin, and so Chinese was in the home, Chinese was in the food, Chinese was in everything we did. Everybody was an auntie and an uncle.
Oh, yes.
And so that's
my culture.
Yeah,
right, you
auntie
can relate to
and
that. And, but I was confused because growing up, I thought everybody was my auntie.
Yeah.
I thought we had the
That's our
biggest
thing.
family
That's our thing.
in the entire world.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, going to school in Canada, that wasn't the case. There were clear definitions of what an aunt is, and that
Right.
was given to me. And I was like, but you're my auntie, and you're my uncle. Like,
Yeah.
what does that mean? And so, trying to make sense of what does it mean to be Canadian. I grew up in Scarborough. A lot of diversity in Scarborough, and so I actually didn't really know I was Chinese, I'd say, until in grade 7.
I love that.
My parents brought me to a private school in Toronto, and it was very European Canadian. That's what I'd say.
Okay, yeah.
And for the first time, I realized, oh, I'm Chinese.
Huh.
And yet, when my parents would bring me back to Hong Kong or China or whatever it is, because my Chinese wasn't perfect, I would also be seen as not
Yeah.
quite Chinese.
And
Yeah.
there'd be,
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
you're Canadian.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there'd be this, you know, as a young person growing up, it'd be a lot of identity. Who am I?
Displacement.
Am I
Yeah.
Chinese? Am I not? Am I Canadian? Am I not? Where do I fit in? And eventually, where I am today is finding out, hey, I'm all those things.
Yeah.
I'm the fusion of all those things.
Yeah. The best of all
I'm
those
something
things.
new,
Yeah.
and I need to embrace that. And what does it mean to embrace that and live in a world that may be a lot of people struggling with their identity as well?
So I'm so curious for you as a pastor of a Chinese church in Canada. Do you think there is a place for these, as you're saying, like there's these three languages that are all happening within the same community. How do you see the place of that in the future of Canada? In this diversity of Canada, what's the future of language-based churches?
I think language will always be necessary in some capacity. In our day and age now, I mean, there are so many people on the move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether they're refugees, whether they're pursuing education, whether they're pursuing work, I think that's what, I don't know the exact statistics, but the statistics today of people on the move, of being in a different country than they were born or they were raised, is actually staggering. It's one of the huge global crises right now today. On top of the fact that many of them are refugees, so they're displaced not by choice.
Right.
And so, for some of these people, for many of these people, if you say to them, "No, you need to speak English," this may be 65-year-old
Yeah.
grandma, whatever it is, and you say you need to speak English in order to hear the gospel.
Impossible.
No.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So how do you translate it, not just language-wise, but practice-wise? So how do you speak to them in a way that makes sense to them?
Yeah.
How do you speak to them and present mercy and love and
I love that.
and grace
Because
in a
some
way
people
that they
think that
understand?
progression is sort of discarding culture
Right.
and sort of kind of becoming colonialized, Europeanized, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's not
Yeah.
the case
Right.
from what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing I hear sometimes people will say is that if you're European Canadian, you're acultural. You don't have a culture. It's like, no, you do.
Actually, you do have a culture.
Everyone has a culture.
Yeah.
So getting rid of culture it's impossible.
Right.
Right.
Every person, every people group has some sort of lens that they're bringing
And
forward.
it's not
Yeah.
the way to go.
Right.
Yeah.
Tim,
Right.
That's big.
you know, I know you teach this, at Tyndale, but as an average person, trying to understand, like really, you're kind of going about your life and you watch the news, and you're like, oh, and then, your uncle has some very strong thoughts about this issue or people group. Like, think about all the influences that
Yeah.
we are faced with on how to see different people groups, cultures. Average person, how do you make sense of it? How do you start the journey of saying, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying around the table. What do I do? What can I do as just this one person to help and to understand that one day we all will be roaring with palm branches,
Yeah.
before the Lamb of God?
Yeah, it really depends on, obviously, like where people are. Where some people are, I mean, they may be so removed or isolated from diversity
Yeah.
that I would almost just invite them, you know what, see a movie from another country. If all you've seen is Hollywood movies, you
Yeah.
walk into a Bollywood theater and check it out.
Yeah.
Watch that for a few weeks.
Get some K-pop.
Yeah, get some K-pop. And that may be for some people.
Yeah.
For others, I would say, you know what, and especially in Canada, it's not just a city thing. It's not just the big urban cities that have it. I mean, even in a lot of rural Ontario, we're finding migrant workers coming in. And so there is diversity coming in, but you can choose to either just walk past it or enter into it.
It's so funny. I was having this conversation with my girl Joanna earlier this week. It's about being intentional, isn't it?
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
are things you can do. There's some
Right.
churches that have carnival days or expo
Yes.
days.
Yeah.
A day where you just acknowledge and celebrate all the cultures,
Yeah.
and there's food tasting.
Right.
And
Right.
it's really about making intentional choices
Yes.
to be inclusive.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yes, and to be drawn towards difference.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
even on those cultural food days,
Yeah.
there's going to be some things that look kind of funky, and you don't want to go near.
Yeah.
It smells different,
yeah.
but what if you force
it's
yourself?
about learning.
I gotta try. Why
Yeah.
do these
Yeah.
people eat this food? It doesn't make sense to me,
Yeah.
and I want to eat this stuff over here because it
Yeah.
looks appealing. It smells sweet. It looks like stuff that I'm familiar with. But how do you intentionally go for the things that are different
Right.
and start asking better questions?
And we look at Jesus' life in that he was very intentional
Yes, he was.
about, connecting with. I mean, share about that. I mean, all of us here, like when you look at Jesus and how he connected with different people, he modeled that so well.
Over and over again, right? I mean,
Yeah.
one classic passage is Jesus at the woman at the well, and meeting this woman who's Samaritan. But we have to understand how big of a deal it was for him to be there
Yeah.
at high noon with this woman and saying, and what does he say? He says, "Get me some water." So
Yeah.
he asks her to teach him or to give him something
Yeah.
instead of going there and saying, let me tell you, you're a woman, you're Samaritan.
Yeah, let me tell you about yourself.
Yeah.
Well, but yeah, let me
Yeah.
teach you. I mean, he ends up doing that, but he begins with, teach me, or show me, give me
Yeah.
something. So if we go to another culture, people that are different than us, and go first with, hey, show me about your people,
Yeah.
without judgment, without you know,
Yeah.
And I'm
is
going to
up
circle back to what
Good.
you said that really has just resonated in my heart. It's changing our frame, changing our perspective, and coming from this place of I'm actually missing something.
Right.
And if I
That's
see
good.
it that way, that I'm missing the richness
Yeah.
of the kingdom,
Yeah.
then I approach it differently. I
Yeah.
want to find the missing pieces.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Well, it's the model that God gives us. You know, I think I love Philippians 2. It's one of my favorites. I quote it all the time, partly because I just can't get it in my head enough. Like I can't, it hasn't transformed me enough yet, but it's this idea like, who being in very nature God did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, and he becomes like us. And so this idea ultimately that I'm referencing is that God came to us and came in the way we would understand him,
Came as
with
us.
great humility,
Yes.
and did not consider his own thing something to hold on to.
Yeah.
He was God himself, but submitted. And so this idea of coming cross-culturally, our own version of that, what does it look like to be like Christ? It's humility.
Yep.
It's not holding on to the things we have
Surrendering.
rights
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
that's
saying
good.
we are going to become less and
Right.
humble in this context, so and be like this person,
Right.
so that the gospel can go
Yeah.
forward.
Good, Joanna. Tim, I am so thrilled that you are actually teaching intercultural ministries. I think
Yeah.
that's important. I think these conversations are important. I think you being a pastor and wrestling through these issues within your own church is important. And I think, though, teaching, young minds, mature minds about this is really important as well. Because I think education and
Yeah,
educating
kudos
people with a
to
new way of
Tyndale for
thinking.
that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how can people connect with you, or if they're interested in wanting to do
Sure.
into this program, what can they do?
Yeah, well, so Tyndale is actually set up, some people don't fully realize, I mean, there's a university, there's the seminary, and then there's what they call the Open Learning Center, which is kind of
Okay.
continuing ed. And that's actually where we're sitting under right now. So continuing ed really is for, you don't have to be a 20-something student enrolled in a program. It's for churches, it's for lay people, it's for organizations. So we're set up specifically for that. We're set up within Tyndale to serve the community. So we were actually working with organizations that aren't churches, that aren't Christian even, just to say, hey, diversity is a question that we're all facing, and what does that look like? So we're running
That's cool.
workshops, we're going in doing consulting, some assessment, some coaching for individuals, for teams.
Oh, wow.
So
that's
you're working
good.
with leaders as well.
Yes,
Oh, fantastic.
yes,
Wow.
exactly. Yeah, so that's where we're at, and if you go to the Tyndale website, find the Open Learning Center, and that's where we are.
Good for you. I love that. I feel like I want to do this program.
No problem. Here you go.
You're like-
sign up.
Ding, ding,
Yeah,
ding, ding.
yeah.
Well, Tim, thank you so much. Tim
Thank you.
Tang. I just want to keep saying that. Tim Tang. Tim Tang. And I know, Tim, you're going to be writing a blog post for us. Did you
Okay.
know that?
I
Okay.
do
Well,
now.
well, Tim is going to be writing a blog post for us about his thoughts on intercultural ministries. I know that we'll be writing some things. I think there's some thoughts here that it's percolating. We're like, we need to write this down. But again, if you're interested, tyndale.ca, and I think is it /Tim?
Yeah,
Something like
You'll
that.
find it. You'll find it with
We'll
that.
have it up on our website. But thank you for watching. I think this conversation could be a whole series. If you have questions, go onto our website and hit the button that says say hello. There's a Dropbox there that you can write different things and ask us questions. If you have questions for Tim, please ask him, ask us. But thanks for joining us on this Wednesday. Hope this conversation from Monday and today is really getting you to think about how do we look at our neighbors and people? How do we hang out with them? How do we see them? And are we going to change our mindset that Cheryl is so excited about, where it's like, what can you bring to me? What is what I'm missing? I'm missing something, and looking at it from that perspective versus the other way. So thank you again for joining us. We'll see you on Friday. Guys, thanks for being here, Tim.
Thank you.
So fun.
Thanks.
We're going to have you back.
Sure. Sounds great.
All right. We'll see you Friday. Have a great Wednesday. Bye-bye.